Sure, everybody.
I'm gonna get yourself in there too. That really good face she's making.
Rats upon rats upon rats upon rats and more rats. The Black Plague was a sweeping epidemic that hit England and Europe in the mid-14th century. Today, the Black Plague isn't so significant, but back in the day, when you had rats running the streets and feces all over and such unsanitary conditions, something like the Black Plague was horrifying. It was simple though. It started with one microbacteria, a couple rats, and a ship from China. The big issue with the Black Plague in the 14th century is that nobody knew what was happening. So that small microbacteria was unknown. Nobody knew that it was going to be significant 400 years later. But here we are. Not us, but Europe and Asia and everywhere else watched the fall of a quarter, possibly a third of Europe's population in 20 years. That information came from the CDC, which published a report about plagues. The bubonic plague, the one that swept Europe, was one of them. So this small bacteria is Y. pestis. It's so insignificant that you wouldn't even think it would be an issue, but it hooks on to rat fleas, and then the rat fleas bite rats, and then this huge colony of rats get together and all of them get infected. And back in the day, rats on ships was nothing uncommon. They would run on, they would run off, they jumped in the ocean, they bite the people, they eat the food. It was common. So this small bacteria on these rats was nothing to be afraid of because nobody knew. So that one small ship going to Europe from China ended 60% of the population. Harvard published a report about the bubonic plague and the history of it and how terrifying it truly was. They said that if it came down to it, the only thing people knew what was going on is God was punishing them for what they didn't know. But that's all they could think of, it's all they could fathom. So when you look at this ship that came to Europe, it was just a trading ship, just like everything else. Trade was huge, boats were just starting to become important. Everything was so significant, but also very small. The world was still a small place. There was tons and tons of people, but communication was slow. So when that first boat came to Constantinople, people didn't think anything of it because it was normal. So this boat carried the bubonic plague. And it had hit Asia a couple years before, 1300s, early 1300s, but how were people in Europe supposed to know it was going to hit them next? They didn't, until it was too late. So this boat comes to Constantinople, the rats get off, but when that boat lands, all they see are dead bodies on this boat. There's nothing. No one's alive. All of them are infested with sores and pus and blood, and it was disgusting. Imagine the horror on their face when they saw this boat pull into the docks. It was not something anybody had anticipated, and the bubonic plague swept like nobody could have imagined. It hit Constantinople, then it hit other cities, and it just kept growing until 60% of the population was gone within the span of 20 years. And it went from big city to small city to small city to the outskirts. And according to History.com, one of the biggest groups that were attacked, not by the plague, but by the people, were Jews. This was a time when Jews were still seen as wrong and nobody really accepted them. And the bubonic plague sweeping Europe, well, everybody wanted somebody to blame and they didn't know who to blame. So they blamed Jews. And they ran. The Jews didn't have anywhere else to go. They ran as far as they could, and they were saved. Now, a lot of people didn't know what else to do. But now we have the medical knowledge to know what to do. And the bubonic plague, although tragic, wasn't something that's going to happen again. Because we're smart now. Smarter. So, here we are.